All today to our virtual lunch and learn with the Museum of Geology. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Shelley Vernager. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations here at CARA, the Center for Alumni Relations and Advancement. Before we start, I just have a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's Zoom and it will be uploaded to our CARA YouTube channel. This does take us a couple days, so check on Monday if you're wanting to share it. We encourage you to share it with your colleagues, your friends, people in the community, because it's going to be pretty interesting. I also want to encourage everyone to use the chat function. Click it, make sure that you change it so that your responses go to everyone, and tell everyone who you are, your major, and your graduation year. I also would like to encourage you, if you have questions for our speakers today, put those inside of the Q&A section, and at the end of this presentation, we'll give them a chance to answer those. I am going to start off the chat today with my email. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'd love to hear what you want to hear about next. I'd love to know if you're interested in an alumni event in your area, and I'd like to help you get that going. But for today, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lori Anderson. Dr. Lori is the Director of Museum of Geology and the head of the Department of Geology and Geological Engineering at South Dakota Mines. She received her bachelor's degree in geology, biology, and music from the University of Minnesota Morris in 1985. She went on to earn her master's degree in geology from Bowling Green State University in 1987. And Lori completed her PhD in geology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1991. In 2011, Dr. Anderson joined the South Dakota Mines campus as the head of the Department of Geology and Geological Engineering and as the director of the Museum of Geology. Sorry about that. Her work combines field research in both modern and ancient settings, museum studies, and laboratory analysis. Her teachings focus on the biological history of Earth and the geologic history of life. She especially enjoys teaching field courses. So I'm going to brag on Dr. Anderson for just a minute. Dr. Anderson has been named the Fellow of the Geological Society of America. This is a prestigious distinction only awarded to a small percentage of leaders in her field of study. According to our president, Jim Rankin, he said Dr. Anderson is an excellent example of a world-class faculty that we are fortunate to attract to Mines. We're lucky to have her dedicated leaders like Dr. Anderson on campus who serve as mentors to both students and other faculty. And with that, I will give you Dr. Anderson.
Hey, well, thank you very much. I better share my screen. I'm going to share screen, and then I'm going to make sure I introduce you to Haley and Nate. So I'm the director of the Museum of Geology, and I work very closely with the two other people on the call today. Haley Johnson is the assistant director of the Museum of Geology, so she is in charge of all things related to public programming, exhibits, things like that. Kaylee comes to us from a bachelor's degree in geology and a master's degree in paleontology from the South Dakota School of Mines. And Nate is our associate director, and he takes care of all things having to do with collections. And so he come to us with a PhD from UC Merced and a master's degree from the East Tennessee State University, but I forget where you got your bachelor's.
I do too. No, just kidding. UMass Amherst.
Oh, Amherst. Okay. Thanks. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take turns going through the slides. I'll do the first few, then I think Kaylee jumps in, and then finally Nate. And we don't have a lot of slides, so we'll have plenty of time for questions, which we would really enjoy answering for you guys. Okay, so everyone can see the title slide? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Okay. Oops, and then I got carried away. Okay, here we go. So the South Dakota School of Mines has the Museum of Geology. We have been part of the School of Mines since its inception, but we opened to the public in 1923. So the 100-year anniversary we're celebrating is 100 years of public exhibits. So the mission of the Museum of Geology is to explore the natural history of Earth through scientific inquiry, preserve specimens and data as a dedicated repository for scientific research, and promote understanding of the geosciences through outreach and educational efforts. The folks that work in the museum at present, in terms of staff, you'll see myself, Nate, and Kaylee. And on June 1st, we will have Sam Wright from East Tennessee State University joining us as the preparator and lab manager. This week, I got to watch via Zoom her master's thesis defense, so that was fun. And then we also have some folks from, primarily from the Department of Geology and Geological Engineering that serve as curators. And so they provide oversight in how we manage various collections in the museum and how we put together exhibit materials and programming. And so those folks on this slide from left to right are Mary Beth Price, who is currently the graduate dean, but was a faculty member in geology and geological engineering, and she is curator of maps. Sarah Keenan is an assistant professor and the curator of recent vertebrates. Darren Panyak is the curator of fossil vertebrates, and then Gocha Ustanisic is the curator of minerals. So we consider a large group of populations as key stakeholders in our operations. So these would include especially students, faculty, and staff in the Geology and Geological Engineering department, but more broadly, also the same groups of folks campus-wide. We work closely with a number of federal and state agencies as a repository and partner. We have relationships with a number of different regional museums, other educational institutions in the region, local school districts, students and teachers, tribal governments and colleges. We bring in visiting researchers to work in collections or collaborate with our faculty members, community and professional organizations, business and industry, and of course, our public visitors. So we're just ramping up to a very busy time of year for the museum public floor. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee now.
Yeah, so just to celebrate 100 years of public service, we figured we would go over a little bit of the history of the museum as well. So we were founded in 1885, right alongside the School of Mines. And at that time, we weren't actually South Dakota yet. South Dakota didn't become a state until 1889. But back in 1885, one of the professors, Gilbert Bailey, donated over 5,000 mineral and fossil specimens that really form the foundation of what we know as the museum today. And you can see a photo of Gilbert. It's the gentleman with like the rad white mustache in this upper left corner on your screen. At that time, we also hadn't really been doing a lot of expeditions, but however, Professor O'Hara at that time, part of the Geology and Geological Engineering department, started leading paleontological expeditions into the White River Badlands. And he's actually all over this slide. So with the Triceratops skull in the upper right, that's O'Hara. The man in the Badlands picture on the lower left is also him. And then you'll also notice in this kind of middle picture on the lower side, he's the guy standing to the left of President Coolidge and his wife, Grace. So he's a very big figure, and you've probably heard of him as alumni of the O'Hara Building, but not a lot of people remember that he was originally, like by trade, a geologist and paleontologist. later in his career in around 1911, he would have become the, I believe, 9th president of the School of Mines. And he's also the reason we have things that we hold so dear today, like our tradition of the freshman beanie. He also created the football stadium, the original one, M Hill, and then our M Day celebration as well. So he's a big guy, not only for the museum, but especially for the university as well. And we have a lot to thank for him for existing in general. Also in this kind of time period in the early 1900s, we had a exhibit on economic geology and local Black Hills rocks, and also 2 maps that were handmade of the Black Hills that all won medals at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. In 1923, like Lori mentioned earlier, we opened as a public institution. Before then, our collections were really used for research by professors, and then teaching our students at that time geology and paleontology of the area. And I will also note, his name's not on here, but Guy March, you might have heard his name too. I believe he was a math professor, but he's one of the main reasons we actually opened to the public and started our, commitment to the community and, educating the general public in general. Also at this time, the Triceratops skull that you guys might have seen on the museum floor, and is also the one pictured with O'Hare in that upper right corner, was found and excavated in 1927 and later became the state fossil of South Dakota. So it's not just any Triceratops out there, it is our Triceratops skull that is the state fossil. And if you wouldn't mind advancing the slides. Also around 1927 is when President Calvin Coolidge visited campus and visited the museum, and he and his wife had some amazing comments and were really interested in the natural history of this area. So pretty cool that we also have that claim to fame of having an actual president visit our museum. Moving on, in around 1935, O'Hara passes away, unfortunately, and Joseph Connolly takes over as president of campus. Connolly, however, is also a paleo and geologist. So in the 40s, he led expeditions again into the White River Badlands of South Dakota, but with funding from the National Geographic Society. And he's not pictured here, I ran out of space, but he did do a lot of work for the museum and also help, fund things like the new O'Hara building, which was built in 1943 and 44, where the 3rd floor was dedicated to the museum, and that's the museum you come and see today. Before 1943, we would have been in the main building, which no longer exists. Also at that time, we have one of our first preparators, Harold Martin, starting to build all of the skeleton mounts that you guys see today on the museum floor. So you can see him pictured in that upper right corner with the Edmontosaurus, with his beautiful suit and also a blowtorch, because PPE was non-existent. Also in the lower right, you can see him pictured with Alice Beebe, who is a local artist and helped out in the 1960s to create the Badlands dioramas that you guys still see today. Our very first preparator, director, and curator was also James Bump. He's pictured with the mosasaur in the upper left corner of your screen as well, and he would have been active basically since he was a young guy all the way up to his career as director basically. Also in the 60s, we have Bill Roberts and Rapp publishing the mineralogy of the Black Hills. A lot of alum have very fond memories of Roberts, and I love hearing those stories. So if you have one, please tell me. But he's the gentleman in the lower left corner with the microscope. In the 70s, we were codified into South Dakota law as part of South Dakota Mines. So it's pretty cool that we've got a law about us that we have to exist. Also in the 80s, we celebrate our official 100-year anniversary along with South Dakota Mines as our centennial. Kind of cool that we've got 2 birthdays now, pretty neat. And then as we go through, we start developing field courses with James Martin for paleontology courses, so our students can go out in the field and learn more about the methods of collecting fossils and how to prepare them, things like that. And then more recently, we were able to garner enough funding to build our own building that's called the James E. Martin Paleontology Research Laboratory. And that houses a lot of our collections and our world-class lab space. So that was a really big hurdle for us because when O'Hara opened as a building, our collections were actually in around the South Dakota Minerals Room, I believe. And then when our collections got too big, they actually went into the basement of the old gym building where the old pool was. And so for quite some time, that's where our collections were, that's where our lab spaces were. So this was really great that we were able to move out of that space and have enough space to really work on our fossils and take care of them in a way better environment. And then COVID kind of overshadowed this for us, but we did get our accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums in 2020. And that was a really big thing for us. We are the only the second natural history museum in the state of South Dakota to have that accreditation. So that's awesome. And then of course, this year we're celebrating our other 100-year anniversary being open to the public. So yes, next slide. And just a little bit about what we do for the school. So we decided to kind of break it up between the strategic priorities of the School of Mines' current strategic plan. So under academic and co-curricular excellence, we provide a lot of hands-on training that a lot of other places may not. So we have classes in exhibit design, collections management, fossil preparation, paleontology resource management, and all those courses in turn support the paleontology master's program, along with the list of courses that are also listed on your screen. So we have a field paleontology course, geomicrobiology. There's a lot of courses that not only help our master's in paleontology, but our bachelor's in geology, geological engineering, and then our graduate studies in geology and geological engineering as well. Next slide. And of course, we do a lot for outreach and engagement. So we have a lot of partnership with the Tech Paleontology Club. Some of you may have been a member at one point and are familiar with some of these events. Paleontology Club provides a lot of the backbone to our big Halloween event, Night at the Museum, our spring event, Dino Extravaganza, and then anytime we provide a rock and fossil ID day to the public, typically in the spring and fall semesters, and they help us facilitate all of the activities and booths that occur on those event days. We also have presence on events in the Black Hills like Neutrino Day, where surf kind of celebrates the research that's going on over there. We participate in a booth, usually with some hands-on activities. There's the Women in Science Conference that occurs once at School of Mines and then once up at Black Hills State, where local 7th grade girls come to learn about women in science and engineering and, kind of explore those careers. We also help host the fossils camp for high school students through the geological engineering and geology department. And we also participate in career fairs, whether they're high school, middle school, elementary school. We're usually there, especially if they're like, please come, we want you to have you there. And then of course we have our exhibit floor that we're trying to update regularly, and our students actually help design and install some of the exhibits that we have. And then we also employ students in all areas of the museum to give them that upper edge on having experience in a museum setting or a lab setting. And then those same kind of work experiences can be offered to our volunteers, whether they're students or whether they are community members or alumni. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it off to Nate to talk about research.
Okay, thanks, Kaylee. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research activities that we conduct here at the museum. So the museum has 8 staff and faculty, as has already been mentioned, that study a wide variety of topics. So these topics include fossil conservation methods, fossil preparation, geobiology, geochronology, paleobiology, paleoecology, petrology, taphonomy, and much more. And so a lot of these methods are applied to our fossil specimens here in the museum collections. And our students take advantage of these collections for their projects as well. So in any given year, we have about 10 undergraduate students that conduct research on specimens within the museum's collections, and about 6 graduate students that conduct their their master's theses on these projects. And so these students cover a wide variety of topics as well, usually under the guidance of a staff or faculty member, and apply a lot of methods to address their research questions. These methods can include CT scanning, things like photogrammetry, morphometrics, fossil geochemistry and bone geochemistry, and much more. So there's a lot of exciting research opportunities here at the museum. Next slide, please. So now that I've mentioned the research opportunities here at the museum, I want to talk a little bit about the collections that facilitate this research. So the museum has 8 different collections areas. These include vertebrate paleontology, recent vertebrates or zoological specimens, both modern and fossil invertebrates, paleobotany, so fossil plants. We have mineralogy and petrology collections, archives, which have historical records that are relevant to the museum and its history. We have a library with extensive holdings of books, journals, preprints on geology and paleontology, and we have a maps collection. And so collectively, these collections hold over 500,000 individual specimens that have been collected since the late 1800s, over the course of the long history of the museum, as Kaylee mentioned. And so one of the large initiatives that we're working on now is trying to get these collections digitized, and so they're accessible online to a wider variety of users. So I mentioned before that several students will work on our collections, our faculty will work on our collections, but also external researchers come in from around the world to study our specimens. And so in any given year, we have about 20 external researchers that'll come in. Some of these researchers are regulars. They're here like once a week or every other week. Some people just come in, once a year for a few days. But what we really want to do is get these specimens digitized so that people can access these data online and use it for a wider variety of research topics. And so digitization of our specimens can take a variety of forms. So it could be as simple as just taking our specimen information and labels and entering them into our digital database Specify. But it can get more comprehensive than that. It can go all the way up to full 3-dimensional digital renderings of our specimens. And so here we have our first alligator specimen that's collected in 1899, alligator prenasalis. And what we did was, thank you. We've taken this specimen, we've done molding and casting on it now. So we have replicas that we can use for various teaching and outreach activities. And we even did a full 3D scan of the specimen. So this was 3-dimensionally reconstructed using photogrammetry. This was actually one of our graduate students' term projects for their collections management class. And so we now have a 3-dimensional image that people can use for different activities and projects. And so we do involve our students and volunteers in many aspects of the curation and digitization activities that we do here at the museum. Next slide, please. But all this work that we do, it takes time and it takes money. And so we're very grateful for the past, present, and future, hopefully future support that we've received to curate and digitize our collections. I just want to go over some of those activities really quick to wrap up here. But some of the past curation activities that we've done in the museum have included IMLS grant funded, so the Institute of Museum and Library Services, funded projects for our Cretaceous Western Interior Seaway. We've received NSF funding for some of our orphan collections, getting those curated and digitized, and NSF funding for curating our Cretaceous collection from USD. We've also received funding for curating and digitizing Bureau of Land Management projects. So specimens from CICAD National Monument, Fossil Lake. And moving on to the present, we have two currently funded projects. One was for National Park Service collections. So this is a private donation that we have to curate collections from Badlands National Park and Wind Cave National Park. Those can be seen up here at the top. So on the top right, those kind of pinkish bones are from Badlands National Park, from the Pig Dig collection. And then to the left and just below it, we have, if you squint really hard, you might be able to see a bunch of little teeny tiny bones on those trays. Those are microvertebrate fossils from Wind Cave National Park. And so these two collections have different fossils with different challenges. So the Badlands collections are mostly of mid-sized animals, things like oreodonts and telodonts, so little kind of pig, sheep, camel, hippo-y looking critters. And then our Wind Cave collections are going to be, again, mostly microvertebrates, so things like salamanders, snakes, rodents, all those kinds of little tiny animals from the Wind Cave cave systems and rock shelters. And those fossils are going to be more recent, so they're going to be less than 1 million years old. A lot of those fossils were deposited during the more recent glacial and interglacial ice age cycles. And so they give us different information, but they also have different challenges. So with our Badlands collections, a lot of those older fossils, a lot of them are fragile, and they need a lot of remedial conservation work and stable rehousing work to keep them from falling apart, essentially. And so a lot of the time-consuming work that we have to do on those collections is things like repairing fossils, gluing them back together, creating new jackets and other mounts to hold them in a stable way where they won't fall apart over time. On the other hand, our microfossils from Wind Cave, they tend to be very well preserved, but there's just so many of them. So we have collectively tens of thousands of individual specimens from those collections and a wide variety of different species. So the challenge with that collection is getting them sorted, identified. So all of this is time-consuming work that a lot of our graduate students and volunteers have been working on. They're doing an excellent job, but it's important to be able to fund their work on these collections. The more recent funded project that we have currently is an IMLS grant, so Institute of Museum and Library Services grant for fossils from the Richmond Hill gold quarry. This is a site in the Black Hills of South Dakota. It's unique for two reasons. One is that this collection is Pliocene in age, so falls somewhere between the Badlands Oligocene collections that are basically halfway in time between dinosaurs and or the last of the dinosaurs and today, and then the more recent ice age collections from Wind Cave. So it fills in an important gap in our understanding of regional paleontology in the Black Hills. The other reason the site is important is because of the preservation of the fossils and the variety of material that is preserved. So as you can see on the left column, the middle picture, we have the underside of an ancient dog skull. So this is a 3D skull of an ancient canid that's really well preserved from this site. And right below it, we have, from the side profile view, a little shrew skull. So this is a skull that's only about a centimeter large, but very well preserved also. And so that's pretty unique, having excellent preservation of both large-bodied and small-bodied animals. And so we're really excited to work on this project. We just started this work in the fall, and we should have a lot of exciting updates on that soon. So looking to the future, we have a proposed funding for another IMLS grant. So we're seeking funds for updating our mineral collections, mineralogy and petrology. These collections have not had consistent oversight or care since the last curator, Bill Roberts, passed away in the late 1980s. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on these collections, but we really want to make them accessible for research purposes again. And so we're seeking a grant to get these curated and digitized. In the meantime, we've done a lot of sort of startup work on the collection, getting it inventoried and cleaned up. That cleaning has included containment of some of the more hazardous specimens that were just lying around in the collection. So, radioactive ores, asbestos, all that fun stuff. But safety was a priority while we were doing this, so we were fully equipped in our PPE so that everyone could get this work done safely. And so the collections are going to be, don't worry, I'm almost done. So the collections are, safe to use again for different research and curation activities. We've also submitted a collaborative grant proposal, an NSF proposal with SDSU for curation and research on, again, the Wind Cave collections. So this project would involve looking at community-wide traits of mammals from Wind Cave over the last 100,000 years. So looking how their traits have changed over that time in response to various glacial and interglacial cycles. So really exciting stuff, exciting projects that we're working on now, and hopefully exciting projects that will be new projects that we'll be working on in the future. I look forward to giving you all an update on that soon. Next slide, please.
Okay. I'm hoping it go, there we go. When I don't try, it moves. When I do try, it doesn't. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying that we hope you come and visit us at our 100-year celebration of being open to the public. It is on the 27th of May, so the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. We have several groups coming, some partners coming and participating as well. This is a partial list of who will be there, but we will be open all day with special events, and hope to see you. And if we don't see you then, please come and visit us this summer sometime. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their
We have a few questions for you guys.
Okay.
So, excellent. Well, Dr. Anderson, if you would stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
And I have 3 questions here. That way everyone can see you as you're talking. Perfect. Thank you.
Did I stop share? Okay, good.
Nope, that's perfect. All right. So the first question is, how many K-12 students do you serve annually? And to follow that up is, how many public visitors do you get annually?
So that's a good Kaylee question.
Yep. So annually we get on average around 25 to 30,000 visitors total. We definitely saw a bit of a hit with COVID and everything, but we've been up to about 30,000 from last year. K through 12 we serve annually. I had to pull it up. I saw the question and I pulled up our stats from last year. Last year we served around 1,200 students. And I don't think that includes the 500 to 800 students that we serve when we go to like the Women in Science Fair and things like that. But those are around 1,200 for like tours, activities, facilitating classroom, things like that. So
thank you. One person said, first of all, great presentation. I concur. Great presentation. They were wondering what is required for accreditation and what does that accreditation mean for the museum?
So I guess I can start out and see if other folks want to jump in. So the American Alliance of Museums has an accreditation program that looks at all aspects of museum operations. So that would include, policies on collections management, plans, strategic planning, disaster management, collections management, code of ethics. They look at your financial standing. They look at the condition of exhibits. They look at the condition of the collections. They look at, that you have a plan to continuously improve. And the advantages of that is that it gives you a gold star in the museum community. So making it, good, making you so that if you have participation in various grants, especially collections grants or museum exhibit improvement grants, that that you are known as being a responsible partner in the museum community. I hope that's a good answer.
That was a great answer. I even understood it. So thank you for that, Dr. Emerson. I have another question here for you. How many of the museum's skeletons are actually fossilized bones and are cast, or how many are cast of the bones? I think we missed a word. Yep.
So
I can, oh, go ahead, Julie.
yeah, I can go ahead. Sorry. So depending on the skeleton, so for example, the Edmontosaurus is 50% real bone and then 50% cast. So when we usually find a fossil in the field, we don't always find all of it. So in the case for our mounts, they're usually like a mix of actual fossilized bones and then cast of bones that they just kind of filled in. In the 1940s, what they would do is basically paint all of the bones and the cast the same color. So it's a lot harder to see what's real and what's not. It's a little easier on the mosasaur and plesiosaur skeletons that we have because the real bones are rougher in surface. So you can kind of pick out what are real, what are not. And I believe the mosasaur is 70% real bone. And then the plesiosaur is maybe around that 60 to 70% mark as well. For some of the mounts for the White River Badlands, I believe those are very close to being 100% real. The only one that is completely cast is the Archaeotherum. We used to have one that was a real fossil mount, but I think he through time decayed and deteriorated, and the mount we have now is actually the original mount that was used at the pig dig site in Badlands National Park when we would have, or they would have interns like digging at the site and things like that. So it was used as an interpretive display there, but is now part of our display. So very good question though.
Thank you.
I'll add that our research collections that are off exhibit are the majority of them are, real fossils, although we do have a small research cast collection too. Most of those research casts are going to be important specimens that are replicated from other institutions that people can use for research here.
Thank you,
Shelley,
both.
I see that there's a question also in the chat.
Yes. Is the museum considered a nonprofit 501c3?
It is not. It's considered part of state government. And so we are part of the university. And so our ultimate governing board is the Board of Regents.
Excellent. Well, I want to give a minute for anyone else to ask a question while you're out there, but I wanted to show everyone online a great resource that we have online for you. You can see here, I'm sharing, hopefully my screen is showing you our archives. So our archives can be found through our library. So if you go to our South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, sdsmt.edu website, you can go type in library. It'll take you to our library front page, and there they've got an archive inside of their blue line of all the different options of things you can search there. And when you get in here, you can search anything. And I put in Badlands, and it here just talks about how mines that it was fossils and remains that were found in the Badlands were collected. Both minerals, ores, and fossils were sent to the 1904 to the Louisiana Purchase Expedition in St. Louis and was awarded grand prize. So you can find all of those really fun, cool information through our archives. So get out there. There's a wealth of information. I have a question for you guys. When I go through some of the archives, I saw a picture of some of our students and professors going through the Badlands, and part of the Badlands at that time had the name of South Dakota Mines. Do we still have a section out there?
So it was named School of Mines Canyon, and of course the canyon is still there. I believe it kind of straddles the border of Pine Ridge Reservation and Badlands National Park, but it's still, like, historically it's named that. I don't know if it's still like technically named that today or whatnot, but the canyon is still there, and you can still hike to it and look at the historical pictures and find where that's at in the Badlands. So it's still technically there.
That's very cool. I didn't know that until I ran across it through the library. Well, I don't have any new questions, but I did want to take a moment. I want to thank all of you, Dr. Fox, Dr. Anderson, and Kaylee for joining us today and presenting on the museum. Can you do a shout out of the date for your 100-year celebration again?
Yes, May 27th, so the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend from 9 to 6.
Excellent. And I want to let everyone know that in June, we have the K-Tech, our radio station is presenting and talking about how they're doing some new collaborations. In July, we're going to hear from the Mechanical Engineering Department and from Bobby. She is going to talk about estate planning, and it's actually very interesting. I listened to her session last year, and we have a compliment in the chat. They said excellent. That they learned a lot. Well done to everybody. I also want to encourage everyone to go to our website. We've got a lot of events coming up this summer. We're doing alumni events in Denver and Omaha, Kansas City, Minneapolis area, and I encourage you all to join us. I want to remind you that today's Lunch and Learn was recorded, and so I have a raised hand. Daryl, do you want to type a question in before I finish, and I'll let you do that? But I want to remind everybody that we'll record this. We'll post this on our Kara YouTube channel. We'll also send a follow-up email that you can share with your colleagues, your friends, people in your community that would be interested. And the question from Roger Myers to everyone is, I have an issue of discovery in the Badlands that was mishandled. Oh, well, I will, in our follow-up, Roger, we will have the contact information so that you can get a hold of Kaylee or whoever they need to contact to get things looked at. I do know people stop by campus all the time with rocks and findings to have them identified and looked at. So we'll make sure that you get that information so you know who to follow up with for any kind of those questions. Again, I want to thank everyone for today. I don't know if anyone noticed, but they picked a very fortunate day. It's May the 4th. And so with that, I will say, May the 4th be with you. And I want to thank again all of our presentations and everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.